somebody who sort of has a stake in society, being able to build diverse applications to serve diverse communities, this is a really critical piece of the puzzle.
Rob, I'm delighted for us to get the chance to be here together. We've just come off a conversation about artificial intelligence and the way in which community college systems are starting to adapt it. We've been doing a lot of work on immersive learning technologies. Emerging technologies are sort of everywhere in the education and workforce space right now. Where do you see the biggest potential as we start to look into the future?
Well, I mean, I think we just heard in the last conversation, and something that I'm pretty excited about at the moment that we are sitting in the evolution of this technology, is how this emerging technology, both immersive learning and virtual reality and mixed reality, but also artificial intelligence, which we've just been talking about, have the potential to both transform the way that people learn and work and can communicate and interact with each other, but also the ability to deliver that in a way that is both personalized and delivers opportunities to individual people. I mean, I think one of the things that everybody in this room understands is that whether you're a learner or a worker or any of us, you have very distinct needs, jobs that you need to get done in your work, and distinct skills that you need to develop. And one of the things that I think is particularly exciting about the technology now is that really for the first time, we have the ability to scale that learning and the ability to deploy it to lots of people in the world in ways that weren't possible even 5 years ago.
Yeah, I love that. It's so often that we are trying to think about these technologies together. It's sometimes we hear them placed in opposition with one another, like one is winning or losing. Mm-hmm. But they are so much more powerful together. And that idea of personalization through AI in the context of immersive learning technologies, I think can be especially powerful. Something that we've seen in our work on this at JFF is this question of whether we're developing and deploying off-the-shelf VR training solutions, for example, supporting people to develop the kind of durable skills that they will need in their future workplaces. The context of that really matters. So to be able to leverage something like a generative AI tool to craft different settings, if you're in an office, if you're on a manufacturing floor, if you're in a different environment, creates that kind of personalized learning experience that can be really, really relevant. Are you all seeing especially powerful examples of that in your work?
I mean, I think that there are a lot of different examples where the combination of the immersive capability and then also generative AI is really creating opportunities. I mean, the work that you're doing, I think, is a really prime example of this, and so I hope you'll talk more about it. But I think, in the education context, I think there are a number of developers that have been using both virtual and augmented reality as a way of, giving people access to different settings, bringing people together to learn in areas where they couldn't otherwise. I mean, we talk about this idea of digital twin universities. Morehouse is an example of a university that's been quite a leader in this, but there are others that are doing it, that give people who couldn't travel to a university access to the experience of being in a school, being with other learners. And then, one thing more on the workforce skills side of things that I've been really excited about is there are developers that are taking sort of a combination of VR and then also large language models to be able to help people get personalized training on how to do a workforce skill. So for example, there's one organization that has, a plumber. So if you're learning how to be a plumber, that's a very experiential kind of learning experience. You can't learn that just from a book. And so giving people the ability to be in situations that maybe are high importance for somebody in that trade to know, but that aren't the kinds of things that you come into every day, that's a really important value. But then you can also take on top of that and tune a large language model on a textbook, let's say, so that it has the repository of knowledge, and then it can look and see, is this person missing a particular step? Is this person needing to engage in a dialogue about a particular topic, and answering their questions in real time? I think that's a really powerful way of taking the education that we're already able to deliver and scaling it. It's always going to require teachers to be in the loop. I think it's always going to require people to build the knowledge base and all those sorts of things, but the ability to deploy it at scale, I think is just something that we just haven't had.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's a lot embedded in that answer that we've been paying attention to, both in terms of how you can take the power of large language models like those that Meta is building and others, but to be able to refine them for a particular context, whether it's with your own data or with an industry-specific corpus of data. What a generalized large language model knows about plumbing is going to be very different than what an industry body or a training organization like Interplay Learning knows about plumbing. So you have to be able to develop that specific context, both for the occupation or the industry, but also, to your point, for the learner, what they're looking for and what they need. And I think that's still a little bit further in the future, but is an area of really tremendous promise. I think the other thing that gives us real, I think, hope in this space too, as we look ahead to the future of personalized learning, is just the ability to leverage these technologies to lean into the idea of inclusive design, which I know you've been thinking about, we've been thinking about. It comes up in so many conversations in spaces like this. How can we make sure that the voices of teachers, of learners are at the table, when we're prototyping this technology, but even in the design phase? Tell me a little bit about how you all have been thinking about that.
Yeah, I think, particularly when we think about these novel technologies that we are building, our general philosophy at Meta has been to build foundational technologies that are kind of a platform for others to build on top of. And in order to do that properly and well, we need to have other voices at the table. And I know JFF, as an example, has been really involved in a lot of those discussions, but we also have exercises like Inclusive Design Lab, which is essentially a program where, as we're building the technology, we bring people that represent different parts of our community who are going to use the technology in different ways to the table so that we're making decisions in parallel. We have advisory groups that we work with that represent people from different parts of the world, different communities within the United States, where we really talk with them on an ongoing basis about the decisions that we make to make sure that we're building thoughtfully and responsibly, and that we're actually serving the needs that we hope to be serving. So that's one piece of it. But the other thing that I think is really both important and also timely today, since I'll break a little bit of news, but we just earlier this morning announced an update to our Llama large language model platform. And so this is an open source AI that anybody can use to learn on, to build technology on top of. It's free, it's openly available, and I think it's just a really exciting example of how a company like ours that has the capability to build this technology, which most people outside of a few large tech companies don't have the resources to build, but then give it to the world so that people can build the kinds of innovative applications that we're talking about. And so, as a part of that, I think one piece is just making the technology openly available in the first place. We talked, in the earlier conversation, we were talking about the need for resources to train students on AI. A big part of that is actually having access to the same kinds of models that a company like a Meta or an OpenAI or Google would have. Those just aren't available at the same capability level as are available commercially, other than Llama and similar open source models. And so the models that we're announcing today, there's going to be a really large one, 405 billion parameters, which is the largest size open source LLM that exists, but also smaller models that can run on your computer. So that a student in a community college, for example, who wants to learn how to build with AI, who wants to fine tune for a particular application, can just download it and deploy it really easily. And so I think it lowers the barrier to entry and enables those kinds of opportunities. The last thing I'll say about this, particularly when it comes to open source technology like Llama, is that's another area where building with the community is a critical priority. We actually just did a first, what we call Llama Community Summit, that we held at our headquarters in Menlo Park a couple of months ago as a part of building up this release, where we brought together developers from around the world who were doing really innovative things with it to make sure that as we're building, we're thinking about not just our use cases and how we will use it in our products, but how other people will. And so that led to an investment, for example, in building more language coverage, so that as we're thinking about, making this technology available, it's not just in the US. It's in, and it's not just in English. It's in a bunch of different languages that people in the US and around the world speak. We're deploying to, the Global South, those kinds of things, so that, if we believe that this is a foundational technology that can really change the way we work, but also the way we live and learn, making it available in those ways is going to be really important. That's something we took out of those conversations.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's a lot in there. One thing that I would love to double click on is the idea of open source models, which we hear about a lot in this space, especially as an especially promising avenue for startups, for individual creators to build on top of. If you go, I would love to go a click or two deeper into what is it about the open source model that's distinct from some of the other models that exist out there that matters for this as an individual creator, for instance, and the skills that people need to really tap into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one thing I'll say is that, as a company, we've been really invested in open source for a long time. I've been at Meta for about 12 years at this point. And in that time, we've had something like 1,000 open source projects. So this is not a new thing. I mean, a lot of us have, really started to talk about AI because of ChatGPT and generative AI. But this has been a long-standing investment. And I think what it basically means when it boils down to it is for a lot of other companies that build in the AI space, these models sit behind closed doors. So you can query them like you might download an app, or you might have an API, application program interface, where you can query them, but really they control the model and they decide how you can build on top of it, which has a couple of implications. One is they get to control what people can develop. So, I think if our premise is we're starting from the perspective of building technology that other people that have expertise in education or in health or in other sectors are going to be able to do more with in those sectors than we would be able to do, making the technology open is really important. From a data perspective, I spent a lot of time thinking about privacy, and I think the educators in the room probably do too, given their responsibilities there. One of the concerns with a closed model is you're sending a bunch of data through somebody else's servers. They control what they do with that data. You may not have visibility into how they're doing it. With an open source model, you can just download it, run it on your own infrastructure, or you can work with a cloud provider that you choose to be able to make sure that you're controlling not only the model itself, but the data. And then I think the last piece is really access to opportunity, right? So, the cost to build one of these models, I mean, we're talking, billions of dollars, and not to mention just the access to the computing infrastructure that's needed to train models. So when we're talking about outside of a few companies that are highly capitalized and have access to this technology, there's just not the opportunity to enter this space. And so when we're talking about people, job opportunities for people who are in college today, for example, the ability to build with AI, meaning actually access the models, to tune them in a way that works for a particular application that they're worried about, doesn't exist in the same way unless you have open source. And so if I'm thinking about this from the perspective of not just somebody at a big technology company like where I work, but somebody who sort of has a stake in society, being able to build diverse applications to serve diverse communities, this is a really critical piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I think it ties into some of the way that we've been thinking about this at JFF, which is how can we start to expand use cases for this technology, as well as more deeply understand the skills that we need to unlock it. In the previous panel, Antonio and Gabriela were talking a little bit about how they are training people for careers not only in AI itself, building the kinds of models that you're describing, but in marketing, in finance, and other kinds of fields that will leverage these kind of skills. You sit at one of the biggest companies in the world that's working on this. What are the kind of skill sets that you would want the people in this room to be paying attention to as we think about preparing a future workforce, that extends into community colleges, that extends into apprenticeships, that extends into all of the populations that we serve? So,
I think that, some of, in the previous discussion that were already covered, I think are exactly right? I mean, on the technical side, having coding skills is going to continue to be important. And so, the sort of basic math and computer science and those things, I think, are continue to be critical. On the technical side of things, I think there are new skills. Prompt engineering is another example that was used that just didn't exist a couple of years ago. That wasn't a concept that we had. So I think those things are true. But I also think one of the big areas that's going to be important is how to use this new technology in diverse fields. So we talked about marketing, but I think when you think about what this does, generative AI right now is enabling us to do things that capture knowledge or capture ideas in novel ways and to synthesize them more efficiently. So that's, I think we hear a lot about, is this going to take away people's jobs? Is this going to, or is AI going to control the workforce? I mean, I think the reality is a lot of us who are involved in AI is not set up for idea creation. Right? AI is really good at helping with creativity as a tool, the way you would use a word processor, or you'd use Photoshop, or you'd use your phone. I think this helps to enable people to create in new ways. And so I think understanding how to use it as a tool for writers, understanding how to use it to organize a bunch of information. AI is not going to be as good as a professional writer at, writing a news article, for example. And so I think there's these kinds of things where the technology is going to be really good at speeding up some parts of people's jobs. And so understanding how to apply it in the context of each of these fields is really going to be critical. I think that, you often have this sort of, should we worry as educators about people using AI for cheating on tests and things like that? I do think it changes the way that we think about the role of technology in education and the role of technology in the workforce. But as an employer, the people that I would like to hire, I'm not as focused on, can this person write a basic essay without the use of AI, right? What I'm focused on is I have a new problem that nobody has been able to solve before, and I need somebody who is creative and smart and thoughtful and able to think outside the box and be able to use the tools that they have available to them to solve those problems. And so I think in addition to the sort of the core AI skills, which I think open source is a good example of helping with, just helping educate students so that they can leverage this technology in a way that improves their output and enables them to solve those hard problems.
Yeah, this time has gone so fast and we're almost at the end, but I think that's a beautiful place to land, because the question that comes up all the time in AI is what are the jobs that it's going to destroy? How is it going to take away work from people? And what you're leaving us with is this idea that there will always be work that is essential for humans to do. And that the more that we can figure out the way to work with these tools, whether it's AI, whether it's a VR or mixed reality headset, the ability to work in concert with technology, understand its capabilities together with human capabilities, that's the path forward. And the more we can live into that space, the better we're all going to do for ourselves and for the populations that we serve. I think we're just about at the end of our time. So I want to thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Rob, for joining me on stage.
Thank you, Alex.
This is such a great conversation. Thanks for being with us.